Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the 1% Code podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melva. I am so excited to share with you a recent interview that I did with Dr. Mark Costas. Dr. Mark Costas is not your typical dentist and business coach. He learned early on in his career that success is reached when you gather like-minded people who are driven to be the best in their business life and their personal life. It was so exciting to chat with someone who is probably about a decade ahead of where I am in my entrepreneurial pursuits while maintaining a career that I wanted to share portions of that podcast interview. I was on his podcast called the Dentalpreneur Podcast, and you can check him out by going to truedentalsuccess.com. So let's take a listen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. All right, guys, this is going to be a treat today. We have a very intelligent physician on with us today, and we were talking in the pre-chat. We have a lot in common in that she is very interested in lots of different ways to generate income, multiple streams of income, we'll call it. Welcome to the podcast, Melva Pinn-Bingham, MD, who is a board-certified radiation oncologist, serial entrepreneur, and investor. Through her online private community, the 1% Code Collective, she provides strategies for top income earners to create multiple streams of income to support the career they want to love again. She's also the host of the newly launched podcast, the 1% Code Podcast. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, Melva?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast today.
Of course. I love this. I love when I meet other healthcare providers that are also very entrepreneurial. I was very interested in medicine and in dentistry when I was coming up. I selected dentistry because I felt like there was more room for entrepreneurialism in dentistry. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm fascinated to hear your backstory about, how you diverged from strictly potentially a medical professional to now a serial entrepreneur as well. I'd love to hear it.
Right. Sure. Well, thank you again for having me on your podcast. I'm super excited. For the longest time, I haven't been on podcasts or done live interviews because I just had so much going on. And I was like, well, what do I want to talk about? And I talk about this in my podcast, but I didn't talk about being an entrepreneur for a long time. I felt these constraints of, okay, you're a physician, you're a career professional, and you've gone to school and you're expected to do this, or you make this amount of money. And it was almost this point I had to be released from that to say, I'm an entrepreneur. I like to make different, ways, making money differently. So it started for me. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. So
it sounds like we're at an AA meeting, right? It's like, my name's Melva and I'm an entrepreneur. It's like you almost have to give yourself permission that it's okay. It's okay to seek other ways to generate income. It's okay.
Right. Like it's okay. So you give yourself permission. So I remember actually I got into medical school, and when I got into medical school, I had sold my donut unit. Everyone cracks up at this because when they admitted me to medical school, they were like, well, we only accepted you because you had a mini donut business. So it was called Mel's Mini Donuts. And my husband I bought it senior year at Duke University, and it was like midnight madness. So we'd make these donuts. I got paid through the resident fund. Like they hired me as a vendor. And then later they realized that I was using an actual unit that made 100 million donuts per hour. And they're like, well, we didn't know this was really happening in the dorm, but we signed off on it. So here's your check. So like it started in those days. And then I sold that to someone who was opening a flea market when I got into medical school because I thought it was too much. And then, we've done everything from peddling roses. We ordered roses from Ecuador. And it was at one point, I've been with my husband now. We've been married 14 years, but we dated like 10 before that. We had 3 kids. And he's always been like my partner in crime. And we've gotten more sophisticated in our businesses now. So,
Melva, can I just interrupt you for just one second, just because this is too good. You probably don't know this, but it took me 3 years to get into dental school. So I graduated from UC San Diego, and then for 3 years, I was clawing and scratching. Every dollar that I had went into another dental school application. So for 3 years, I tried to get into dental school. I ended up getting into the executive MBA program at the University of San Diego. But what I did for a living during that period of time is I had a catering truck.
Oh, okay.
So my business, just like you, I had a business right after undergrad, and I cut my teeth in entrepreneurship driving what we call the roach coach. You know, it was like one of those little catering trucks. I had Mercedes, my cook in the back, and we would drive around to construction sites. I'd honk the horn just like a ice cream man, and the construction workers would come out, and we would serve them French fries and burgers and carne asada burritos. So it wasn't a donut truck, but it was a donut stand, but it definitely was similar. We have similar entrepreneurial backgrounds. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's awesome. But like, I think what that highlights is when you're hungry and you want to make something happen. So it sounds like you were doing that in between getting into school. And I took a year off in between undergrad and med school. So it was kind of that. We also owned a garden gift shop in between that year with the donuts, but it was just looking for what's possible. And it's kind of funny. I don't know if this works for your audience, but we looked at a pooper scooper business because we started to ask the questions, what is the need? What's the market and what can we do and insert into our current lives? And so, it was hot back then, but I had to be, maybe I was 20 then, and people were making so much money just going around picking up poop from dogs. It's like $1 trillion industry in the pet industry. But anyway, I never did it.
Yeah.
But it was just,
follow your passion.
Right, follow your passion. At least you should. But it was just that concept of passion. So for me, I never got the MBA. It was a lot of back and forth. I'm looking at a lot of different programs and I didn't do it. I think, it might be a dream at one point, but for me, it was that hustle, that desire, how to make something better. And a lot of it was, I don't know how to explain it. Like I was looking for opportunities where I can make a difference somehow. Like food makes people happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, entrepreneur was also a balance to the career. So as an oncologist, it's a lot of sad times. If you're just now meeting me, I'm always laughing in the clinic, whether it's, good news or bad news, we have a good time. But it was like this escape from reality. So another thing I did, which I don't know if you did this, but flea market. So I got into undergrad with my essay about flea markets, actually.
Really?
And we talked about the cultures that are there. So we'd get there and there were flashlight shoppers. So again, it was my husband I was dating at the time. We get there at like 4:00 in the morning. You could go around and see what other people have. And I could make my money by 9:00 before it started. But there were all these families. So like I learned about rice milk, and there were people that had pigs there in in like the burner, and it was all these different cultures and families. And that was a time, obviously before COVID, and we were able to sell things, meet people, make relationships. And I wrote about that, like the flashlight shopper to get into medical school.
That's cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. And it was cool. And it was a way where people didn't have to know me as my identity as, top of the class, going to medical school. I just was Melva. Like I was plain Melva. And I think it goes back to, like you said, being in an AA meeting, like, hi, my name is Melva. I'm a doctor and an entrepreneur, and that freedom to do that. So that's my background. Where we are now, we're real estate investors. It's a lot of things I do with my husband. We're real estate investors. We've had commercial, we've done rental properties. We own a Cold Stone Creamery franchise. We're in negotiations for a second Cold Stone Creamery. And we have a Subway franchise that we acquired. And we got both of those in the pandemic.
Wow. No kidding. Huh. That's interesting. I'd love to. Okay. So entrepreneurialism is something that I think is ingrained in a lot of people's DNA. You either kind of have it or you don't. Right. So, I think the reason that people are attracted to entrepreneurship is a lot of they are able to express their creativity, right? That's the reason that it's interesting to me, where you can kind of take a spark or a vibration or an idea and turn it into something physical. And I'm a quick start, so I love to get things up and going. I like that first dollar to come in. I like to see it grow a little bit, and then I'm gone. I'm on to the next thing, and I turn it over to my integrators. And I have several businesses, and that's basically my pattern over and over and over again. And I realized, when I did that personality test, and then we realized that I was a quick start, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't make you a bad person if you bounce to the next thing and go to create the next thing, and don't stick in the one business that you created for 40 years. I just couldn't imagine doing that, which is why even though dentistry was very suited for me, I felt like multiple practices kept that entrepreneurial itch. I was able to continue to scratch that entrepreneurial itch. So what I'm getting at is in the franchise world, do you feel as though you are stifled at all? And does it ever feel like a job because there's certain rules that you have to follow within those businesses? Because you could be an entrepreneur and be a franchise owner, but I just wonder if you're able to be truly entrepreneurial in those situations.
Yeah, so I think, that was one of those. And we did, just so I can step back a second, my husband and I looked at the model of business acquisition. So we got into the franchise with, you know, um, a business that had been there for 10 years. And we invested in that specific Coldstone location because a local casino was coming. And this is Virginia, like casinos are kind of new here. And we had the research. It was almost like a real estate move where you get something where you see you can add your entrepreneurial
Sure.
creativity and improving it. So
Right.
that's how we looked at it. Now we're with they're based out of Phoenix, actually, Kahala brands, and they have, I think, 25 under their umbrella.
Well,
And
Doug
they're over
Ducey,
Coldstone.
Doug Ducey, our governor, founded Coldstone Creamery and then sold it to
Right.
this company. So
Okay,
yeah, I'm familiar a little bit with
Oh, yeah.
with the history of it, but yeah, it's an Arizona company, and Doug
Yeah.
Ducey is he's a pretty popular governor, actually. But
Yeah.
yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
So, well, I just was saying, with a company that has that large umbrella,
Mhm.
there was opportunities for, I think, that creativity where they want their franchisees to come in and own multiple chains, own multiple stores, and you have variety that way. And
Okay.
then, as far as, I don't know, because that was kind of a hesitation. Like, do you really feel like you can be an entrepreneur as a franchise owner? I think they're different areas. So we did two models. So we did the business acquisition. So we got an existing business. In our first year, we increased the sales over 100,000, which was already a busy store, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. So that was a lot of fun
Wow,
to be able
that's
to say,
crazy.
yeah, thank you. I
Your
know.
ice
It
cream
was like,
shop
wow.
increased by 100,000 during the pandemic? Because
Yes,
that's not
people
even a
ate ice cream
typical.
during the pandemic.
That's like not a typical like to go food. That's interesting. That's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of that is a lot of Coldstone's revenue is cake sales. So celebrations people are having at home, so they got cake sales. The
That
lines
makes
were out
sense.
the door, socially distanced, stress. You eat ice cream. The company was phenomenal. Like Kahala brand, they're very smart. And that's the other thing is when you franchise, it has to align with your vision as an entrepreneur, and
Sure.
the leadership is solid. Otherwise we wouldn't have got in there. But it was also opportunities. Like we invested at a time when we had a lot of uncertainty. Like we put a second stone in there. We got a cash register. We brought on people, like, employees, even though we didn't know if people were going to show up or we're going to be shut down.
Mhm.
But with that, so one, we did business acquisition. Two, we brought in management. So we wanted to, the first couple months we were in there, I pulled some 16-hour days on a Sunday and then went to clinic on a Monday. We had our kids in there washing dishes, as the manager who was in place at the store wasn't there the first 3 months. She didn't have COVID, but she had a flu. So it was like, you got to figure this out. And again, it goes back to that innate drive. Like, can you do it? Can you show up? And now, I haven't been there in a while, but we were looking at kind of like you said, I think I'm a quick start analytical. I was a mix, but
Mhm.
we're the same way. It's like, find something, take it to a certain level, and then pass it off to someone who just wants to pour their passion into it daily. And that wasn't really our goal. So I feel like I could be an entrepreneur because now our goal is to have like 100 of these stores. We're already working on the second one within a first year, and we have the model, and then we have our system of management. So, I don't want to make ice cream and cakes every day. Like, it was fun at first, but that's not the goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny. I love this. I can continue to tell entrepreneurial stories all day with you, but it's funny that I can just imagine, like, if one of your patients came in and you were behind the counter scooping ice cream, right? And
I've done
they're
it.
going like, yeah, it's interesting because I have a similar story, of course, because I bought a car wash. Entrepreneurial at heart. I bought a car wash. It was a soft touch car wash without any mechanisms or anything like that. It basically was like a steel building that you drove through. Once you were parked in there was a hose and a bucket, and you'd have three people
Okay.
and then you'd soap it up, you'd rinse it off, you'd pull it around, and then you'd have three other people drying it off. So it was very, very manually and human intensive. It's not like
Right.
The blue ocean car washes now that are going up all over the country that are completely mechanized, and it's it's 25 of them an hour, and they just pump people out. This was like 3 an hour, one at a time. Horrible business model, but it was in this small town of Chino Valley, Arizona, and I purchased this car wash. And I distinctly remember one of our guys, and this happened a lot in the car wash business because it was kind of a lower end, kind of minimum wage kind of positions that we were offering. One of them called in sick, and I was on the drying line. I was one of the guys drying the cars, and several of my patients came to the car wash that day. And they're like, "Dr. Costas?" I'm like, "Yep." yep, I just bought this car wash and I'm just helping out today. But I was just like you. You do what you have to do when you're serving your entrepreneurial passion, and that's just part of the deal. It's part of the deal.
Exactly.
So, tell me about your real estate ventures. Do you have commercial as well as residential? What do you guys do with real estate?
So we started the real estate venture when I finished residency. So I'm out about 10 years or so now.
Okay.
And looking back, if anyone's listened and they haven't started real estate, like I so wish I could go back to, instead of buying like the expensive house on the golf course, I would have done, like my husband just wanted to do the duplex. We live in one side, rent out the other. And looking back, hundreds of thousands of dollars of mistakes later, like we should have done that. But we started with flipping. So we amassed a lot at once. Like we had really good success. We got like 9 at once. And then we looked at portfolios. And then as I changed for jobs and residencies, moving, we needed to have a smarter portfolio. So we got rid of them and we had properties in like 3 states, basically wherever I was going. And we condensed that down to now we have a couple rentals. And then we have a commercial building that's mixed use, that's a rehab. And it's been more of like a slower passion project. So there are 7 apartments up top. There's a restaurant on the bottom, and then like an event rental space or office space. And it's located at a shipyard. So it has some limitations with parking. It's cool. And then you have like historical tax credits if we're rehabbing it. But we've kind of moved slow instead of taking money on it or adding investors.
Is it in an opportunity zone or?
It is. It's in a historical zone where before COVID, there were a lot of plans to redo that area. It's on the water at a major shipyard in Newport News, Virginia. I think it is, but it's been more of those like we're kind of working on it, and, like piecing it together versus finishing it. Like the restaurant's almost done, so the entrepreneurial drive of having our own restaurant is like being built. It should be done in the next couple months. So that we're doing that.
Going to be yours?
Yeah, that'll be ours.
Wow.
So we own the building. We'll own the restaurant. Our cousin, who we actually brought in as a regional manager over our franchises, he's a chef, very well-known, successful private chef. So he's always really wanted to do the restaurant. But that difference between people who have a talent, but they don't have that entrepreneurial skill, we're kind of his entrepreneurial backing for his pursuits. So
very nice.
He, along with my husband, are going to open the restaurant. It's completely different than our franchises. So it's no non-compete. So we have that. And then we've done rentals. That's about it. But we fixed and flipped a lot. We never got into wholesale. For me, that just, I didn't want to do the marketing or set up the marketing. And that's kind of what they sold. And a lot of what I talk to you about in my group is, positioning yourself. I think lending would be great. And we haven't done lending. That's the other thing I would do. So that's our real estate story.
Interesting. Okay. So tell us about, this is a really, really hot topic in our community right now. That is angel investing and finding kind of good tech startups, because man, in dentistry and in healthcare in general, there's a lot of these tech startups, financial startups, I guess you could call them, like financial fintech. They call them fintech startups that are getting a lot of traction these days, and the multiples are really high on the acquisitions. So, between angel investing and lending and the different other entrepreneurial opportunities out there, what are your favorites, and what do you guys talk most about in your community?
So I spent a long time. One of my business coaches actually got in pretty early on our first friends and family round. So we're investors in, it's called Radius AI. They're actually out of Phoenix. I don't know if you've heard them or had them on your show. They kind of shifted their vertical a little bit. It's kind of the artificial intelligence cameras. And originally they were at gas stations. Then they got through to Mayo Clinic and were able to do the identification for COVID screening. So that was really that was my first experience with that at the time. And we went in with a group of other real estate investors, and we kind of did that same joint venture to get in, for the minimum instead of putting all our money in that. And, doing more of those, I think it's a little bit different for me, honestly, being on the East Coast. I don't know that you hear about it as much as like Arizona, California. I trained in residency in Southern California at California Irvine and Orange. So both my girls were born in Long Beach, and we lived there for a while. And I feel like it's just different dynamics. But it was definitely a great move. Like, it's increased our portfolio wealth. I think it takes a lot of risk. And what I find with a lot of physicians, and, I'm not sure if it's the same in the dental world, it's that risk of, okay, this is great. There's startups. What's going to happen to my money? And that's what I hear the most often. People have a pause button. And I'll tell you, when we got in, we saw a presentation. I trusted the mentor who, moved into this kind of like VP role of the company, given our marketing background. And we just went. Like, we just did it. Like, we set up the self-directed IRA, took some funds from the 401k, took some cash, and we just, like, it's done. And I think a lot of people don't do that. That's probably what I would say I hear the most of, is the fear around that.
Yeah. So do you guys in your community and on your podcast, do you talk about the different ways to structure these deals, how to create, passive income? What are some of the hot topics that you like to talk about inside the community and on the podcast?
So I really like talking about leveraged opportunities. Like, I think that's what was missing when I first started out, being in a position where I had enough money to position myself differently than I could have as a broke resident, or, when I was, selling donuts and didn't have any money to my name and I was a broke undergrad.
I hope you join us next week in the second of this 2-part series with my interview with Dr. Mark Costas, founder of the Dentalpreneur podcast and the Dental Success Institute. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the 1% Code podcast, please share with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating, and I would love your 5-star review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on all social media channels at Dr. spelled out DoctorMelva at Dr. Melva. And I want to make sure that you and anyone else you know that would benefit from the 1% Code podcast is a member of my private community on Facebook, the 1% Code Collective. I would love for you to join me there. Link in the bio. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.